The Joe Rogan Experience.
Like how, when you're putting something like that together, do you write it out on paper? Do you just say it until you remember it? Like,
I'm literally and said, "Nick, she left."
do you do that? Do you write it?
Nigga and a nigger on a nigger and said, "Nigger."
So in 2022, a bunch of people decided to cancel Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan in turn said, "Thanks but no thanks. I think I will keep my $1 million deal and I think I'll own it. Thank you, bye, see you next time." Before we get overly invested in internet stories that have zero impact in our real lives, can we please just remember not to send any hate or harassment to any individuals mentioned in this video, even in the case of them being losers. Now, before we get all bothered and feisty down in the comment section, let me just make it absolutely abundantly fucking clear that I do not believe that having a platform of any size qualifies you to be the authority on absolutely anything. If you're a YouTuber, you're basically an expert in making a YouTube account and possibly paying for Wi-Fi. So in other words, as an adult, it is your choice which media you consume for information and which media is purely for your entertainment. So if you decide that Joe Rogan is your witchcraft muse, then that's on you, baby cakes. The same goes for me. I'm literally a thought that uses free editing software. Like, I literally don't know shit about fuck. Trust the qualified professionals that you pay and know IRL. So for a quick context, Joe Rogan is the main host of the highest viewed podcast in the whole fucking world, the Joe Rogan Experience.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
If you have not heard about this podcast, then you might be familiar with him as a UFC commentator and specifically this meme. Gorgeous. Now, that podcast has been referenced many times due to its diversity in guests and topics and politics and...
I was supposed to go in there and just check the mic. Mic check, 1, 2, mic check, and Dre put the beat on. Mic check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Some people have even gone as far as to call Joe Rogan the bro of conservative politics. And yeah, he surely brings that bro energy. So in short, Joe Rogan is basically the Kanye West of the podcast world. It should therefore come as absolutely no surprise to anybody listening right now that Spotify saw this opportunity and seized it. They offered Joe Rogan $1 million for the exclusive rights of licensing and broadcasting this podcast on their show. And please, put a pin in this point, as I would say this is a hefty amount of dollar signs to just casually be throwing away, you know? So where the fuck did all of this go wrong? Well, for those that have not been hanging around my favorite toxic environment, Twitter that is, this might all be news to you. But people have been making a considerable effort to get this guy deplatformed from Spotify and even threatening their own content removal on that same platform. Like, people are molding hard. The peak of this was actually reached in January 31st, and it seems that things might have reached a conclusion, hence me making this video right now. However, uproar about Joe Rogan's podcast, guests, and medical misinformation has been slowly building up ever since December.
Right now, what are you doing to be the strong man right now, Joe?
Elk meat. He's eating elk meat.
You're being paid hundreds of millions of dollars by Spotify. You're living in your special little ranch in Texas. You are literally not doing anything for the betterment of society. What are you doing that makes you a strong man, other than actually lifting weights?
Now, he still defends weed, even though he doesn't have to that much because it's more normalized and it's, decriminalized in a lot of places. That other thing that he now routinely talks about and can't shut the fuck up about and actually defends relentlessly is like COVID conspiracies.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the fuck that happened. I think it just broke his brain.
That's when I think the COVID is when it took a really
and he like moved to Austin.
Horrible turn. Yeah.
And now he even when he had like Dr. Rhonda Patrick on, who's an old friend of his, like he was debating her about how she's possibly wrong and he's right.
Some people think that Ethan is being super concerned about Joe's reign of terror, and maybe he is, but it seems pretty weird how Ethan has been trying to cancel Joe for a month long, even ironically digging up old racist clips from Joe. And I say that it's ironic because there's literally old footage of Hjalti saying racist stuff as well, and it's much more recent. And then, of course, he also went as far as to blatantly body shame Joe Rogan while he looks like this. And it's also later shown that Ethan wanted Joe on his podcast in 2017, and Joe just left him on red. So I, like many others, took this criticism towards Joe Rogan as maybe a little bit salty, maybe the ramblings of a madman, and I'm still inclined to feel that way. But you may disagree. Either way, this got people talking. This started the wheel. I would say this was kind of the beginning of the end, as Ethan does have the biggest platform of anybody that has been actively criticizing Joe. And, well, success. This really truly did get people talking, because if you have a platform, you can absolutely make anything trend, and sure as shit, Joe Rogan started trending, and people were crying out against the COVID misinformation. So basically, there were about 70 different podcast episodes that related to all of this, and eventually, what had happened was that Joe invited a variety of people, including highly qualified people, on his show to discuss the pandemic and all the medical discussion points around it. And in other words, people who were already skeptical of the vaccine and the government actually ended up feeling validated by this. And like, duh, of course they would. It's called confirmation bias. However, the questions that immediately come to my mind for fully functional adults is whether or not someone who is pro-vaccination would radically change their position due to Joe Rogan's podcast. And then also whether it is Joe Rogan's responsibility to take care of his audience as if they lack autonomy in their own body. In other words, can and should the people make Joe Rogan give a fuck? Anyway, since all entertainers and internet people have a flair for the dramatic, the situation quickly escalated with the hashtag Cancel Spotify trending. And then on 24 January, the musical talent Neil Young publicly declared that he would have all his music removed from Spotify if they did not get rid of the menace that is Joe Rogan. So this was obviously very important in the cancellation of Joe Rogan. This was a pinnacle moment. A lot of important and age-related questions came from this event, and it's clearly illustrated in this tweet over here. So basically, if you're under 40, you're probably wondering, who the fuck is Neil Young? If you're between 40 and 60, you're surprised he's still alive. And if you're over 60, you probably do not have a Spotify account. Anyway, Neil Young was big sad at Spotify's lack of fucks and removed all his music from their service and their platform. Now, it is important to remember that Spotify is not a music streaming service. It is a tech company that aims to maximize profits. And I doubt that Neil Young was bringing in an audience that would offset the 100 millis that they already spend on Joe. You know what I'm saying? Then, oh my god, then, people being freaky as shit, they dug up and found some problematic stuff that Neil Young had said in the past, including racist and homophobic stuff. Now, it's of course entirely irrelevant to the whole medical misinformation and vaccination discussion we just had, but it made a pretty good meme and it occupied my timeline. The irony, of course, was that when Joe Rogan eventually addressed all of it, he said that he actually likes Neil's music, and it seems pretty sad to me. Kinda like when PewDiePie's Spotify playlist got doxed and that other musician asked Pewds to stop associating with them.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
So a few weeks ago, things got even messier when people found old clips of Joe Rogan saying some racist shit himself, and which, god damn it, why did everybody need to record themselves saying a slur in a previous decade? What was the urge? Can y'all, get a handle on that? Fuck's sakes. So, okay, he said it and it was bad, and now it's used as another weapon in order to kick Joe Rogan off of Spotify. Now here's some more questions to the debate in my comment section. Please, somebody tell me. So, he said these things many years ago, and he's not a repeat offender, so should he be forgiven? Is that adequate? Also, in the context of him being a source of medical misinformation, does it come off as a sincere concern about racism? Or does it seem like people are just using it in order to get him off of Spotify? You know, the straw that broke the camel's back type of argument. Because the COVID misinformation campaign and Neil's threat have done a grand total of fuck all. If it's not really about racism and only an attempt to get him booted, then we have to stop pretending there's concern for the general public at large and start to admit that people just literally blatantly hate him and his politics and will do and say just about anything to get him booted. Some are even his direct competitors.
That's why
it's just pathetic, this whole masculinity thing. He's a fucking pathetic
fucking moron.
Other people who took a similar approach or stance to Neil Young include India Ari and Roxanne Gay, two people that I've literally never heard of before and will probably not add to my Spotify playlist now either. A weird reaction instead was actually from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who tried to play both sides. He basically came out to support Joe Rogan until the old racist stuff resurfaced and, he got bombarded with it on Twitter, all these receipts and quotes and clips and stuff, and so he revoked his support. I guess that's a move. Some people were saying that this was a serious backtrack, while others were saying that, well, new evidence equates to a new stance. Personally, just like with every other entertainer, I do not value their medical insight or input. I would only care about this if The Rock and Elmo decided to have an actual fucking boxing fight while Joe Rogan was commentating over it. I would care a lot about that. So everything that I'm referring to now happened over the span of 1 week, and eventually both Joe Rogan and Spotify were absolutely forced to respond. And on the 31st of January, Joe Rogan released an Instagram video that he also ended up posting on Twitter.
I'm very sorry that they feel that way. I most certainly don't want that.
In this video, he made it clear that he likes to talk to everyone about everything, and he kind of didn't realize the size and impact of his platform. So he said that he learned, he grew. So what he's going to do instead in the future is that every time that he has somebody on his show saying vax bad, he will offset this by also inviting somebody on saying vax good, thus restoring balance and harmony on the interwebs.
I am going to do my best in the future to balance things out. I'm going to do my best. But my point of doing this is always just to create interesting conversations and ones that I hope people enjoy. So if I pissed you off, I'm sorry. And if you enjoy the podcast, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Spotify. Thank you all the supporters, and even thank you to the haters, because it's good to have some haters. It makes you reassess what you're doing and put things into perspective, and I think that's good too. All right.
He also said racism is no good and that he hasn't been that version of bro in many a year. He's changed, he's new, he's a beautiful swan emerging. And he ended the video off by admitting that he likes Neil Young, so there'll be at least one sad potato after Neil left Spotify. Spotify in turn came out and backed their boy. They said multiple times, yeah, now we keeping this one.
I think they certainly benefit by the extra attention. I think Spotify's doing the right thing by standing by free speech. It's, rockers for censorship. It's the weirdest thing.
Like, their position was very fucking clear. They want money. I mean, they want to support the little guy and support all forms of free speech. Basically the same as what Netflix said in response to the Dave Chappelle walkout, So this was widely considered an unpopular move as people kept tweeting and threatening their subscription fees, and one day they will write songs about the bravery of the keyboard warrior. Spotify's hands were ultimately forced after the racist quotes resurfaced, since, that's the main way to cancel a company in 2022, so they had to compromise. In February 2022, Spotify opted to remove over 70 episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience. They also stated that they would add a whole ass disclaimer section in which people are both given proper medical resources, as well as an adequate trigger warning clarifying that you should not take medical advice from podcasters. The CEO of Spotify stood behind their decision to keep Joe Rogan's podcast on their platform, and it is being both praised and criticized. So here's why people are mad today. Some are saying that since Spotify gave them an inch, they will demand a foot. Before we know it, free speech is gone from all these platforms. Others are saying that this just simply isn't enough to protect the fragile mental space of people who listen to Spotify. Now here's the thing that everybody needs to understand. Spotify probably does not care either way. Like, not even a little. Not about free speech and not about medical misinformation. Spotify is a tech company that cares about its bottom line. The Joe Rogan Experience did not only cost them $1 million, but also is the exclusive platform for this podcast, thus guaranteeing millions of viewers to their website daily. In other words, in order to weather such a storm, it is in Spotify's best interest to give the impression that they care and doing the right thing while also protecting their bag. Although I'm pretty open in my opinion to which side I'm leaning towards, I absolutely do not sympathize with Spotify in this position. So on the 7th of February, the CEO of Spotify, Daniel Ek, sent out a formal response to their employees, thus concluding the whole fucking saga of the cancellation of Joe Rogan. In this letter, X said, and I quote, "I think it's important you're aware that we've had conversations with Joe and his team about some of the content in his show, including the history of using some racially insensitive language. Following these discussions and his own reflections, we choose to remove a number of episodes from Spotify. He also issued his apology over the weekend. While I strongly condemn what Joe has said and I agree with his decision to remove past episodes from our platform, I realize some will want more. And I want to make one point very clear. I do not believe that silencing Joe is the answer." So yeah, Spotify is pretty secure in its pro-free speech, anti-racism arc, and I think that's the best compromise that people could possibly hope for. In turn, hashtag I stand with Joe Rogan was also trending, and people basically said a bunch of things that came across as either wholesome or alt-right or brain dead, and the last one requires my undivided attention. So here's some examples that just straight up itched my tits. This person said, "The hashtag I stand with Joe Rogan crowd are the same people who want to ban critical race theory from being taught in schools. They don't want people like Joe Rogan to feel bad about their racism." Like, what? Ma'am, nobody here is saying racism is good. Like, besides Joe's apologies, Spotify literally removed those episodes and his entire podcast is based on critical thinking, controversial or not. So like, yeah, even race discussion is promoted here. That's the whole fucking point. Just say it, miss. You want this power and influence and nobody wants to give it to you. Then there is this gem. "Something tells me that when the I Stand With Joe Rogan crowd gets COVID and can't breathe, they don't call Joe Rogan. They go to the hospital." Yes, dude. Most people tweeting this is, in fact, pro-free speech and believe that there's an excessive backlash to literally just a bro podcast, a brocast, if you will. It's not a protest for the anti-vax taking the shape of the Joe Rogan man. Like, holy shit, calm down. I hope that everybody tweeting this, the I stand with Joe Rogan hashtag, does indeed go to their medical practitioner for any health related issues, as well as support their source of entertainment wholeheartedly, and can make the distinction between the two. Okay, are we good on that, sir? Great. So in conclusion, Joe Rogan is uncancelled by everybody that matters. Neil Young lost some extra income and one particular fan. Spotify got free publicity. Ethan is big sad his podcast is still not #1, and The Rock looks like a total fucking flake. L's and W's were handed out appropriately, and all around you could say harmony and balance had been restored on internet land. As for me, well, I already said in the beginning, but just so I can reiterate, I'm just a thought with an opinion and I don't know shit about fuck. Bila.
To call or anything.
If there's 8 dudes on security and they're all black, I think that's worth noting.
I just noticed their suit.
However, viewers immediately picked up on how odd the video was. It was truly more sus than a character from Among Us.